So, welcome to the Hispanic Promise Summit of 2023. I'm joined by an amazing group of panelists. It is my honor to be moderating today's conversation. And what are some of the objectives of our session? What are you going to be walking away with? What are some of those nuggets? So, we're going to be exploring unique ways to support the Hispanic community within our companies or organizations. We're going to be discussing and including existing mechanisms and programs or proven best practices that had been driven by the organizations represented here, as well as discussing the development of meaningful campaigns for Hispanic Heritage Month to advance internal career development programs. And in this conversation, we will also discuss ideas that you can incorporate into your 2023 DNI strategies to go from good to better to best. So, welcome to my panelists, and thank you so much for being here today. We're going to have a question that applies to all of them, but I'm going to ask Yesenia to answer this first. So, within your company, what are the programs and mechanisms or best practices that you are most proud of that advance the Hispanic community?
Thank you again for having me. So the way we think about it is in two parts. We are a media company, radio, podcasting, digital type of company. And so we always think about our listeners and obviously our employees. So from an external listener perspective, we really are focused in creating content that is culturally relevant to the Hispanic community, not only in Spanish language, but also serving bilingual Spanish listeners. And so thinking about the content that we put forth in the radio stations, also creating a new podcast division for Latinx listeners called My Cultura Podcast Network. And so bringing more Hispanic creators to the podcasting ecosystem, which is exploding. And then thinking about our employees and, creating platforms such as our employee resource groups, specifically for the Latino community and allowing that camaraderie to form, those conversations to take place and obviously that empowerment, that mentorship. And so thinking about how we support our employees from that perspective is creating a place for employees to feel heard and to also, create that community within.
Thank you. I'll be on the lookout for that podcast. I'm interested to listen. Alex, same question for you.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me here, and thank you for the question, Claudia, to get things started. I would say we're very much focused on setting a strategy and making sure that strategy is very closely aligned. And one of the things we think about is in terms of DEI and how we're going to advance DEI, we think about four key pillars, and that's representation, that's education, development, and community. And so everything we do focused on our Latino community within Nike is very much aligned to those four key pillars. So at least setting that strategy and that approach, making sure that those are aligned is the first thing we think about. But then secondly, how do we make sure we can customize that and make sure that approach is very relevant to our Hispanic Latino community at Nike? And then in doing it in a way that makes sure we have the right accountability, we have the right structure, and then we have the right support team to make sure we're executing on that particular strategy. So to give you an example of what we do, we have a very specific task force that started even about a year ago. And what we did is we pulled together our DEI leadership team. We pulled together a subset of some of our Latinx VPs across the business in various functions. And we also pulled together just some key leaders and sponsors for this community. And we had a really good deep dive design thinking conversation around how can we advance this community and think about the future of this community. And so from that, we set up those four pillars, and we had very clear objectives in terms of how we were going to advance the Latino community that were tied to those four key pillars. And then to make sure that we're holding ourselves accountable and making sure that we're continuing those conversations, we're hosting quarterly calls with our CEO. And I think that just gives us the visibility in terms of giving him an update and opportunity to hear exactly what we're striving towards, what we're looking to achieve within those four pillars, but ultimately making sure we're measuring our progress against that. And so every time we come into those quarterly conversations, we have to make sure that we're demonstrating progress and having those conversations to make sure we're closing the loop on anything.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you for reminding us of the importance of clear objectives, metrics, measurements, because studies show that what doesn't get measured really doesn't improve. So I'm glad that your company is taking the approach of being able to demonstrate those outcomes. So thank you for sharing that. Susie, same question for you.
So we're a little bit different in the sense that we are actually a company that's really built around culture. Encantos was formed by two Latino families that really wanted to super serve our kids. I don't know if you know this, but 26% of kids in this country are Latino, and yet under 5% of the media represents them. So our kids are really not being served by the current media landscape. And so Encantos was formed with this idea of how do we super serve kids and how do we showcase our culture to people that don't understand us. And so we're staffed, we're like above 90% Latino, and our entire staff is really purpose driven, creative Latinos that have different skill sets, whether on the creative side, on the writing side, on the design side. And then we partner with creators, with different creators that come to us with ideas that they want to bring to life for kids. I think it's important to note that when you look at the entertainment industry, and Yesenia, I know you know this well, they're always going to be looking to proven entities, celebrity, IP that is already proven itself out there. When it comes to our Latino market, there is no IP. There's no, where's our Snoopy, our Smurfs, our Alvin and the Chipmunks, you know what I mean? All of the proven Flintstones, pieces of IP that have been out there forever. When it comes to IP that, stars Latin kids or tells Latin stories, there's nothing really out there. So Encantos has set as its mission to create that kind of IP that our families can rely on. And so Canticos is a perfect example of that at IP, right? And we basically came together to craft a bilingual learning brand that is, sing-along videos, a subscription app where kids can learn and play, a beautiful collection of award-winning books and music, right? We have wonderful music that streams on all of the platforms. And the whole idea behind Canticos is to unify the community and to strengthen Latino families. And if you're not Latino, get to know us, because it really, celebrates who we are in English and in Spanish. So I would say our DEI metrics are actually our business metrics. When I log into Giphy and see that 9 billion people are engaging with our GIFs, that's a metric for me, right? When I look at YouTube that we're at 400,000 subscribers and we continue to grow, that's how we check our metrics, that we're really truly engaging audiences as well as our employee base in what we do every day.
Thank you for sharing that. And we definitely want to, even though we have assimilated to the United States and to the culture, there are some things that we want to pass on to the next generation. So thank you for the work that you're doing through Encantos. I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
So Yesenia, what are the steps that companies can take to implement similar programs as part of their D&I strategy, but that also directly support Hispanics?
So I think, depending on the type of company, because I work in media, I always think through the media lens. But I think depending on the type of company that where you're launching those DEI initiatives is really understanding what your employees need, whether that is, more representation in the workforce, more representation in managers who come from Hispanic communities, more representation in the leadership team. So understanding what does representation look like at your company, and then kind of launching initiatives to make sure that you're recruiting from different sources, that you're implementing, those action steps to make sure that you're getting more of that representation that you're looking for, or whether that is like talent retention, for example, depending on the longevity of your Hispanic employees, do you have a retention problem? And is there anything that you need to do to make sure that you're creating more of that culture of belonging and inclusion within your company? Or is it creating more opportunities for your employees, your Latino employees, to provide feedback, right? Or to, have better opportunities for promotion and to seek those roles that they may not, have the opportunity to pursue as much. So it's really understanding where you stand as a company, listening to that feedback. And I think, going back to employee resource group and having that community come together and share direct feedback with you is so important. Really understanding the sentiment of your Hispanic employees, and obviously all employees, right? But this is conversation specifically focused for our community, and really understanding, what are the needs, and as a company, really creating those opportunities to create that, to create that community with your employees, to create those conversations, to host those conversations that are so meaningful, right? Career growth, parenting in the workplace. And, there are just so many amazing opportunities that we can take, especially as the cultural moments transpire throughout the year. Not that we just want to focus on things like Hispanic Heritage Month, specifically in September and October, is our year-long conversation, but taking those opportunities to really engage based on what your employees are telling you, and what are the needs that they're exposing to you.
Thank you. I think that your answer was very holistic and it could apply to any organization of any industry. So, Alex, let me jump and ask you a question. What opportunities do you or your company create for employees to build a strong community and a sense of belonging? And I think this is a deeper dive into the answer that Yesenia just provided us.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to answer that question and give a little insight in terms of the things that we do at Nike. And completely agree with Yesenia's point in terms of making sure you create that community of belonging, making sure that there is that sense of belonging in so many different ways. I mean, we have various internal channels where we allow employees to really share the dimensions of who they are and the various dimensions of being a Latino, right? The intersectionality of those identities in terms of being an Afro-Latino, a Latino who identifies in the LGBTQIA plus population, a disabled employee who also identifies as a Latino. Right? What are some of the unique experiences of being in the cross-sectional dimensions of those particular groups? And so we have things like Slack channels where we have an opportunity for everyone to share a little bit more of their dimensions of diversity, their Latinidad, and the various dimensions of that, whether that's where they originated from, whether that's a particular country that they're representing, whether that's an experience that they're having across the world from their own computer, from their home environment. We have employees across the various countries. So you can only imagine something like the World Cup, where that's an opportunity for everybody to really share and have a little bit of competitive spirit, but also an opportunity for all of us to identify with that and what that identity is. And so there's various ways internally that we do that, but I really love to highlight those intersectional moments because I think those are just important aspects where we can share a little bit more of who we are. We just had an event at our world headquarters a couple of weeks ago in celebration of Carnaval. And that was an opportunity for us to really highlight the beautiful Brazilian culture, the dimensions of what it's like to be Afro-Latino, and bring that in terms of education and awareness to the broader population. So that was one great thing that we did. And as I mentioned, it's not just focusing on Latino Heritage Month or Hispanic Heritage Month, but what are those moments throughout the year where there's a lot of communities that can come together to really share in that sense of belonging of what it is to be a Latino. And I think there's a multitude of events and opportunities to do that. And one of the things that we're also focused on is creating even a sense of belonging within various departments or functions, where when we start to see a little bit more representation from our Latino community, where can we bring those individuals together? And one example that I have is our Latinx design crew. It's something that was very grassroots, but it was an opportunity to pull all of our designers and creatives who identify as Latino to come together in a community and start to build community to help educate the design community, the broader population around what it's like to be a designer, what it's like to be a Latino designer at Nike. And I'm happy to say they had incredible workshops focused on sustainability. How do you educate others? And there was an opportunity to actually bring in a Latina creator and a Latina designer to help educate even our own Latina designers of taking raw materials, taking scrap materials and creating new pieces of apparel, creating new designs. And it's just an opportunity for us to grow together as a community in doing that. So that's just one thing I wanted to highlight in terms of taking that one step deeper in terms of that sense of belonging.
Thank you. I really appreciate that because that, again, that demonstrates that we could be very creative in regards of how we engage individuals and across the different intersectionalities and across different backgrounds. So thank you for bringing that as an example. And we all know that sense of belonging and engagement really help us with retention, and that's something that Jasenia had talked about before. So Susie, I know you touched a little bit upon this, but how does your company amplify and uplift either employees' voices or customer voices or cultural voices by highlighting the collective contributions of the broad and diverse Hispanic community?
Absolutely. Well, you can see our employee voices with every single sort of outreach thing every piece that we put together. It's really a collaborative effort. Our employees are constantly bringing we brainstorm like, hey, what songs should we do? What stories should we tell? Look at this creative proposal we got. Which one should we bring to life? But truly my favorite thing to do is uplift our customer voices, because if you go into Instagram and you put in Canticos parties, you will see all of the beautiful Latino babies, with their fancy photo shoots and their fancy Canticos, sort of like birthday parties, and o sea, these families that go all out, just celebrating their Latinidad with our brand, right? So I think that what makes me the proudest is when I see how much these families have embraced us, and the letters that we get from them, the fan mail that we get on a regular basis of how we've touched their lives, how we've enabled them to painlessly make their children bilingual, how their children are proud of who they are thanks to us. So I think that that is one of the things that gives us the most satisfaction, and both as a team, because we're not a huge team. So us as like a Latino team from Peru, from Colombia, from Mexico, from all over, and from here in the United States, to see that kind of response come in from families just makes our day every single day.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And I do have a 2-year birthday party to attend, so maybe I would look into some of your
That's right.
material because that would be
June is
a
our sweet
great,
spot.
yes, a great gift. So,
Mhm.
Jasenia, how are you engaging with and boosting the profile of the wider Hispanic community in your area?
So I think we are uniquely positioned to really touch, the local communities, obviously through the radio station, to the radio stations, as I mentioned, through the podcasting content that we're creating to make sure that we're touching on the individuality, that wide spectrum of Latinidad that exists in terms of accents and obviously the stories. So from an external perspective, I think we are uniquely positioned to make sure that we're kind of localizing the approach. We have right now over 30 Spanish language radio stations across the country. And so again, going back to making sure that we have that localized approach. But from an employee perspective, I think for us, the big focus is increasing that representation. We have a pretty decent employee representation across iHeart when it comes to Hispanic communities. But I think increasing, especially in those leadership roles, and making sure that, more of our Latino employees see themselves represented in those really big titles and those, opportunities to lead across the company. And so, thinking about, again, boosting that presence whenever we have the opportunity, whether it is, around Hispanic Heritage Month or Latina Equal Pay Day, or, just thinking about, some of the other cultural moments throughout the year that really resonate with specific groups within the Latino community. And I would say, the feedback that we're getting, we've been launching more of the employee surveys across different divisions and really understanding through the divisions and obviously their unique needs when it comes to digital or radio or podcasting. What are employees telling us? What are they looking for? And how can we make sure that we're activating on those needs? Strategically, obviously, on a long-term play. So again, I think it's just constantly receiving that feedback and making sure that we are kind of using our employees from the perspective of, these are the things that they're asking for, and for us to really incorporate within our, our pillars, our strategic goals for the year.
So thank you for sharing that. Customer, the voice of the customer, right? That's what help any organization shift and improve on any of the overall customer experience. So thank you for bringing that up, because I think that it's applicable to any industry as we're thinking about our customers as well as our employees and getting the feedback directly from them. It's probably a gift that we can all utilize to start building up those strategies. Alex, how is your company investing in the professional and educational growth and economic mobility of your Hispanic employees?
And thank you for the question, Claudia. There's a couple things. I think about it both internally and externally. So there's a lot of things that we're focused on internally. I think it first starts with the data. And so as we look across our talent life cycle, where do we see our Latino talent getting stuck? Is that at the front end in terms of representation in various parts of the organization, whether that's at various levels? Is it as folks come on to the organization and they're getting developed, they're getting mentoring? Are they accelerating fast enough? Are they getting promoted at the same rate as the majority groups? And looking at those specific nuances across that talent lifecycle. And then, of course, retention. Are we making sure that we're putting the right programs in place to give our Latino employees a sense of belonging so that they're staying with the organization longer and they're feeling a sense of progression? So I say all that to say, you can build on programs based on that information. And so one of the things that we uniquely identified was we were seeing a lot of our senior level Latino, Latina executives getting stuck at higher levels within the organization. And so we put a very distinct focus on the internal programs that we had and disproportionately making sure we had a majority of folks from those cohorts identifying as either Latino or Latina, and over-indexing on an underrepresented talent segment within our broader population, within the organization. One of the things that we're also doing just more broadly with our Latino employees is hosting a Latino Career Development Week. And it's taking place actually this week. And it's an opportunity for all of our Latino leaders across the business to come together in partnership with allies and partners, in partnership with other leaders across the organization, to host resume building workshops, career development panels and conversations, focused conversations on what we call our IDPs or individual development plans, and an opportunity to just pick up on a few tips and tricks, whether that's from our HR colleagues or other leaders that have accelerated or have done certain things in their particular career at Nike that they can share with the broader organization. And so we just use that as an internal dialogue in a forum and an opportunity for folks to learn and share, and then take those best practices with them into their day-to-day jobs. And then externally, it's really around continuing to leverage the partnerships that we have. We have an incredible amount of partners that are tied to the Hispanic Promise, whether that's ACE, whether that's Latinas in Tech, whether that's SHIP. And we utilize those opportunities to give leadership exposure to mid-level managers or junior level employees to get an opportunity to hear some of the things that have been successful for Latinos or Latinas in those particular spaces. And so we make sure we send the right folks to those particular summits or symposiums. We're making sure we're bringing some of those leaders into our own internal conversations so that we can have that dialogue and share best practices in terms of what really does work well. And then honestly, just continuing to increase that leadership exposure across our business. But we also have other programs that are very intentional in terms of where folks are getting stuck, whether that's at the mid-management level or the more senior level. So we do partner with the McKinsey Accelerator Program, where we send a cohort of our Latino and Latina leaders through that program. We also have partner with ACER in terms of the leadership pipeline programs and other workshops and career development workshops for a specific group cohort. And we have focused development and mentoring pairings as well for a lot of our more junior to mid-level Latino, Latina employees as they're continuing to build their career profile and continue to progress their career at Nike.
Thank you for sharing those very specific examples so that organizations that are listening that have not yet engaged with those nonprofit developmental organizations that are available to us and to our employees could be outreach to. And I have to share HISPA. HISPA has been, sends role models across different states, and we have the opportunity. One of the reasons why I'm bringing it up is because it's an opportunity for employees also to own their development by participating as a role model and sharing with middle school students about our career progression so that we can have them start thinking about their career path and also motivating them to achieve their goals, right? We don't want our middle school students thinking that they cannot achieve certain levels within corporate America, when in fact we do need the representation and we need them to start getting ready even before they start high school. So thank you for sharing that. And the next question, it's our last question, and this will be for all. Can't believe the time it's up, and we're almost at the end of our session. But this is a question that I would like to hear from all of you, since you all bring such a great, different, diverse perspective. What would be the recommendation to a company looking to increase their support for the Hispanic community? I'll start with you, Susie, and then we'll go to Yesenia.
So invest in culture, invest in first hire, make a conscientious effort when you're looking at resumes to hire people that reflect the diversity that you want to project. So start there. Practice, be as blind as you can in terms of elevating talent and really seeing them for who they are. I think a lot of times people have unconscious bias, and it's really hard for them to be aware of that unconscious bias so that they can promote talent that deserves promotion, support the community efforts associated with such talent, and just really be an advocate in the room for your diverse talent. I think that makes all of the difference. And the more that you're aware of where your biases are or where your company has fallen short in the past, the more you'll be able to make a difference.
Thank you, Yesenia, and then Alex.
Yes. In addition to what Susie just mentioned, I think investing in just learning about the Hispanic community and understanding that we're not a monolith, right? And there are different ways where you can engage with your employees, and depending on the type of company that you are with your audiences, I think it's definitely whenever you take the time to just learn a little bit more, you'll be surprised how much better you can perform. And also taking the time to research the organizations, the different platforms that are there to support those initiatives. One of the things that I really think has helped us a lot in terms of bringing in that student pipeline through the internship mechanism is really understanding those partnerships that exist. So taking the time to do your research and find those organizations that can really support you in those efforts. And always, 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 seeking that feedback from your employees, from your audiences, and understanding that it's always a moving target, like, right, there's so many things that change constantly. So understanding that sometimes you do have to pivot and just keep up with the changes, and learning and taking the time to find those organizations that can really support those efforts for you.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I fully agree with my fellow panelists 100%. There's so much awareness and education that needs to happen on the front end for really good partnerships in the community. I would also say my parting advice would be to find coalition partners. And what I mean by that is looking within your particular industry, or maybe even in the communities in which you operate, right? Where are there similar lines of business where you can start to pull together a coalition of thinking or coalition of partners in this fight? This is not a zero-sum game. You don't have to start from scratch. There's other people that are making progress, and we look to others as well to learn from. And so this is not a zero-sum game. This is very much a how do we grow the pie together in partnership to really benefit the overall community as a whole. So one of the things that we're doing specifically within the sports industry is we're partnering with some of our existing league partners in terms of where are our Latinos or Latinx in sports, and what does that alliance look like? And so one of the things that I'm happy to say is we've been partnering very closely with our league partners at the NBA, at the MLB, as well as the NFL. And incredibly, there are three strong Latina leaders in DEI leading those functions. And so that just creates a unique opportunity for us to really capitalize on that and think about ways where we can come together to really build out a plan in partnership for the Latino community going forward. And then how we can use that as a model to help influence and make greater change for others as well.
Thank you. So, with that, I would like to thank Alex, Susie, Yesenia for joining me today, but also for those companies, for those representatives, for those companies that are attending the summit. Don't forget that we have the Hispanic Promise Framework 2.0 that you can access. It actually has great best practices that you can follow through, additional skills that you might be able to build from there. So, utilize that as a resource and a tool in addition to listening to the rest of the panels that will help you walk through, again, a stronger 2023 year. Again, thank you everyone for joining us today.